Hello and welcome to the second Q&A with the Mayor. I'm Matt Sommer,
And I'm Tanner Rice.
and today we have Mayor Don Triplett. Okay, Don, could you tell us what's going on with the square?
Sure. We're like on the gazebo and the park on the square is what I call it. We've been doing a lot of work. We recently buried almost all of the electric lines around it. We've had a problem with low-hanging electric lines, so we just buried them all. We've added the watering system down here to help with the grass and the flower beds and everything. Right now, we just got our digital sign put in, and that seems to be working very well. And the Veterans Committee is working on the Veterans Memorial. It's an expansion. It's a pretty elaborate expansion to our existing Veterans Memorial. They hope to have a grand opening for that during Chief Sarcoxy days. And we've got a contractor working on the gazebo right now, renovating it, helping kind of modernize it a little bit with speakers and new lights and some different wiring and to make it go back to looking more original, if you will.
Now on the Veterans Memorial, how's that getting operated? How's that
Okay, that's
going?
an independent group of volunteers, mostly veterans, that got together and they wanted to see about expanding and better recognizing our local veterans better than what we had been doing. We've pretty well given them free reign. We want them to do and make this what they want. So they've been raising the money, they've been doing the contracting. Out there right now, I would say we're probably almost 50% complete. It's been great. They've been tremendously successful organizing and raising funds and doing everything. It's a real statement of when volunteers get together and they work on something united.
Oh, cool.
And who's in charge of that program? Who would we get in contact with if we wanted to ask questions about it?
Well, Michelle Gouts is our local historian, is our official historian for the city of Sarcoxy. She's kind of picked this up and has been working with veterans to do this. There's a lot of people involved. Cole Cummins has been very involved in the work and the design. Keith Garber's been doing a lot of work and design. But it's almost not fair just to name those three people because there's a lot of people involved with this. But they're really doing an excellent job.
Okay, and then let's go back to the gazebo here. So we're still keeping the historical effect of it, correct?
Yes.
So what can you explain a little bit more about
Sure.
how they're keeping that?
Yeah, what we got to noticing was there was some siding that was starting to get a little bit dilapidated. Some of the boards were curling, and it was just starting to deteriorate. And instead of just throwing paint back on it again, we thought that it might be best to actually go back through and lay hands on every board, and if it needed to be replaced, let's replace it, and then we'll put some good coat of paint on it. Over the last few years, we've added speakers mounted to the outside of it. They'll actually be mounted inside the structure, and there'll be a cover over them, so you'll still get the quality sound, but it'll be more low profile. They won't be sticking out or added on the outside of it. They're also working on the lighting and the electrical. One thing I think is personally pretty neat is come to find out there's actually the original ceiling is actually 4 feet above the existing ceiling, and so we're going to make efforts to try to go back to that original ceiling, and it'll improve the comfort for entertainers or people that are up there, and it's certainly going to look better. A lot of the rope light that's on there now, all of that's coming down, and we're going to have some what I hope to be better lighting to add lights and stuff. If we have like something where we want to change the color on the lighting of the gazebo at night, it'll be right there, and it'll be easier to do, and it'll look better. So all in all, it's going to be more aesthetically pleasing to look at and more effective. So.
Very cool.
Yeah, that'd give a good accent to the square.
Oh yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Good. Now there has been some some talk about possibly moving the bell that's over here on the northwest corner of the inside of the square. So what are your plans for that?
Well, the park board and the downtown revitalization committee are kind of working together in cahoots on that. When you start looking at the four corners of the square, the one corner is pretty much dedicated to the Veterans Memorial. Another corner has got the digital sign, and we seem to be developing features on each quarter or each quadrant of the square. On the side where the bell's located, we have the bell that's kind of in the grassy area, and then we really don't have anything in a corner flower bed that we've got right now. So the thinking is go back and repaint the bell and make certain it's in the best condition possible and it looks good, and maybe just relocate the thing to the corner flower bed. That way it'll stick out more, but it'll also free up more of the grassy area. So it'll add a feature that I think, and I think the park board and downtown group, I think they all feel like that'll just complement the square. So there's been talk about the fourth quadrant, the fourth corner, about possibly maybe looking at putting something in over there. There's been talk about a water feature or trying to restore one of the old flower or pools that was there. I think there's going to be some looking at that just to see, but we've got three corners developed or are being developed. We just as well look at trying to develop the other one, the fourth and final quarter. So.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on the outside of the square?
Okay, can do. Yep, we're doing a lot on the inside and the outside of the square. The outside of the square, again, that's the Downtown Revitalization Committee. They set a goal. They set a couple of goals last year. One being to try to help make an incremental improvement to every building on the square, to do something, working with the owners to do something to make it an improvement to each building. The other thing was to try to help with occupancy and usage. More and more buildings on the square are now active or being developed. The downtown group actually kind of set a goal of trying to get 100% either of occupancy or development on each of the buildings on the square. And so that's one of the things they've been working on. That group actually sat down and building by building said, what can we do to help make that incremental improvement? One of the big things that came up was painting the front facades, painting and helping make improvements to each one. So they went out, they've got a grant that helps subsidize the cost of paint. The council worked with them and targeted some available funding to help cover all of this, and it looks like on a lot of these buildings here, we're going to be able to lay hands on each one. There's some buildings, not all buildings are going to get painted. There's some buildings where we're going to try to remove the paint to go back to original, here's what it used to look like when it was originally built. On some of the ones that have been painted, we're looking at helping with some light repair and to put a fresh coat of paint on it. And again, the goal is to try to have all of this stuff done in time for Chief Sarcoxy Days this year. We're hoping that folks will come to this year's event and be able to kind of stop and take a pause and think, wow, we've really made some improvements in the last year. So
now some of that is included with some of the buildings that the city has recently acquired, right, in the last year or two.
Yeah.
On the
for that incremental improvement on every building, some of the buildings was more about trying to secure ownership or transfer ownership or do something with those buildings. It wasn't just to do a paint job. There's some buildings here that for a few years now, they've been inactive. The ownership's been in question a little bit, and we've been working with those folks to try to secure those.
So I believe one of those buildings that we're talking about in this scenario is part of the Create Here project.
Yes.
What is the Create Here project? What is that?
Well, the Seed Board in 2018, as a group, we kind of came up with a goal of trying to establish a business. The SEED board stands for Circoxie Economic and Entrepreneurial Development Board. A lot of cities have economic development committees. We have one too. And one of the things we talked about doing was to do something to proactively go out and try to attract a business into Circoxie. And then from that idea, the GROW program that we work with through
the Community Foundation.
Community Foundation of the Ozarks. We partnered with them on some of this too, and with 4 other cities that are involved in it, to identify what kind of incentives or pros we could get to help attract people to come here to actually develop a business. And that's what we've been working on. We have a building on the east side of the square that we offered, and it was in the paper, and we offered to sell that building. What we did was we asked for people to provide a business plan on what they would do with the building, how they would renovate it, fix the front facade, and then of course a purchase price for the building. The idea is to try to encourage a business to set up in Circoxie, and not just any business. We've done surveys over the years in Circoxie about what Circoxie residents would like to see here as far as a business, and they've always came back with like a restaurant, kind of a coffee shop, a laundromat. Those were usually the top 3 things that people have always asked about, and it's been consistent. I mean, we started doing surveys with the Chamber of Commerce probably 12 years ago, and those have always seemed to come up as the 3 things people would like to have here more. And so in our proposal that we offered to the public, we actually said we'll give bonus points, if you will, for a startup business that features one of those 3 or 4 things. So as of right now, there was at least 1 proposal. I'll just tell you that I was interested in doing something like that myself too. So I myself have actually made a proposal on a business in that building. Because I'm involved, we turned it over to the city clerk to oversee the bidding. And then when the bids came in, the proposals came in, we actually turned them over to the Harry S. Truman Coordinating Council to review them, so that an outside entity could review them to make certain it was what the council and everybody wanted, and to make certain that there was no favoritism towards me or any other elected official or city employee that might make an offer on the building.
Okay. Now, I believe on one of those options from when you were talking about the surveys from the residents, that they were looking to see develop in Circoxie as far as coffee shops, bakeries, whatever. One of those is being solved in the library, right? Here soon, hopefully?
Yeah, we hope so. The city council okayed the idea of adding a coffee shop component to the city library. We have a large building over there. It's going through development, and we wanted to see a way to expand use and utilization of that building and the library itself. There's always been talk for years about that coffee shop concept, and personally, I kind of believe the economics of buying a building to have a coffee shop in Circoxie, probably it's too risky, and it's probably, the economics probably might not be there. But to add it as a complementary business in another existing business, that changes the economics pretty significantly. We felt like there was space available over there to do that, and it would complement the services that our library currently offers. So we've been working with a couple of vendors about the idea of putting a coffee shop in there. The council has approved a budget to actually develop it, and that's what we're working on right now. Hopefully, with August, September, we'll have an operating coffee shop over there. And the benefit is that it'll actually extend the hours of the library, but it won't be paid library staff that's keeping it open. So we're hoping that, we've received input from teenagers and all kinds of people. So we're really hoping that this will be a popular feature on the square, and we're trying to attract interest and usage of our downtown area. So hopefully it'll go real well.
Okay, and anything else going to be added to the square? I noticed there's some flower pots around the downtown area. And
We have flower pots around the around the outside of the square, and those are being taken care of by local business owners. Most of them are right outside of the buildings. Those folks are taking care of them. We're also looking at adding banners. The downtown group have been ordered some brackets, and they've been demoing some different models of banners to go out there. So I think it'll add a splash of color, and it'll further improve the ambiance of the square.
Okay, that's really good.
Well, that's good information.
I think one other thing, again, going back to that incremental improvement of every building, the city just acquired an empty building on the east side of the square, what's been called the Robinette Cafe, the Robinette building.
Mm-hmm.
We literally just purchased that earlier this week, in fact. The intent is we're going to clean it up, the front facade, and kind of protect and preserve it. The council has talked in the past about building some public restrooms, and if everything works out, we'll have some public restrooms for events down on the square. It won't cover demand during big events like Chiefs or Coxie Days, but we're doing really good as far as having more events on the square. And everything we're doing to develop the square is to continue to make this a public place. And if you do that, one of the most basic needs is to have a public restroom. So that's kind of what we're eyeing this to do. So.
All right. Sounds like there's a lot going on.
There is. We have a lot of volunteers that are working to make it happen. It's turning out real well.
And the occupancy, was there a set timeline that you were trying to get that goal of 100% by?
Yeah, we had said by the end of this year.
Okay.
It is ambitious, and maybe we won't make it, but there's been times when I would think that the occupancy was less than 50%, and several years ago we had a terrible problem here with buildings just getting dilapidated and a lot of them sitting idle and just not a good healthy environment. And it's exciting to me personally when I see that buildings are being occupied and there's more and more use out of each of these buildings. So I'm anxious to see where we're at the end of this year. It's going to be exciting. So
there's some construction going on?
Yep. I call it the 900 block of Center Street. We acquired some lots. One of those lots we had owned there for a while. It was 4 lots on the 900 block, starting right at the corner of 9th and Center Street. We have sold those lots to the Economic Security Council, and they are actually building 2 houses right there. So those are supposed to be finished by November 1st is what I understand. So those will be built and then marketed and sold to people for their own personal residence. So we're getting more information about those. They ought to be able to start marketing those buildings, those houses, within the next few weeks. And of course, we'll have information at City Hall and on our Facebook about what they're going to be and the availability and everything else.
So do you know if when they're selling those, is that going to be based off of average housing price, or is there a certain target that they're looking at, or what?
From what I understand, it's going to be there'll be some income requirements to acquire these houses. It's I don't have all of the details right now, but there'll be some income requirements, and there'll be an application that people can apply for to get these houses.
Okay. All right. So we can just look at that at a future date.
Yeah. This program, we're in that area, but there's not been a lot of. There's been a lot of houses built with this group in other cities, and really just starting here in Sircoxie. And we think it's a good thing because housing is going to be more and more of an issue in Sircoxie. We're already seeing that demand for housing is going up. It's kind of exciting to see the number of people that are involved with buying houses, renovating them, and selling them in Sircoxie. So this, for new housing, this is a major plus for Sircoxie. And hopefully it's just the first of many to come. So,
well, that's cool to see those new houses being built like that, because what those properties they had some dilapidated houses on them, correct?
Yes.
Previously.
Yeah.
One that was, I think, structure fire.
Yep.
Fire damage.
Yep. It's definitely upgrading that neighborhood, and we've looked at Center Street. Center Street was the street in Sircoxie historically, and it was the site of some of the best and most impressive houses in Sircoxie historically. And, it kind of got a little sad there for a while. And we have a lot of work to do. But adding new houses like that will definitely improve, Center Street, our main street, if you will, of Sircoxie. And it'll help with other ventures we're doing in that area too. So hopefully it'll just be the start of a net significant increase or improvement in that.
Right.
So with the demand for housing in Sircoxie, do you guys have any buildings as surplus in the area?
We do actually. This last week, there's a house at 1208 Center Street that we just posted in the local newspaper and on our Facebook. It's a 2-story house that the city acquired through a tax sale. It's gone through multiple owners. It's one of those mortgage companies for sale by owner type of things, and it's been unsuccessful as a house all these years. They finally stopped paying taxes. We acquired it. We've had our building inspector. We've had a number of people go through, including a professional architect go through, and it will require a lot of work, but it's definitely a house that can be salvaged. And so we've offered that to the public. We've asked for proposals. What we'd like to see is ideally a young couple maybe starting their lives to maybe get in there, and what they don't have in money, what I say is strong backs. If they don't have the money, they might be able to get in there and make it a true home for themselves. Mm-hmm. So we've also looked at the potential of what we call short-term housing or short-term rental. We're seeing an interest in like a venue or bed and breakfast, something short-term. So we're not really looking for somebody to take it and turn it into a long-term rental property. We'd like to see somebody that would get it and personally fix it up to help complement the Center Street neighborhood and make it a real home or a real contributor to that. That's really what we're after. So what we're looking at is we're not trying to make any money off of it. Theoretically, somebody could have a good plan, like I'm going to fix this house up to live in, but I can only offer $1. I'm just saying that as an example. It'll be the city council that review this and ultimately make the decision, but we're hoping if somebody can get this house at a very low price, that the money they would have spent on a mortgage, they could spend on fixing the house up to help make it easier on them. So, yeah, it's a win-win.
And then better the community and better the appearance.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's one of the houses that used to be a contributor to the neighborhood, the Center Street. It was one of the nice houses that used to be here. And it's just over, the last several years has just been allowed to deteriorate. And so we're looking to reverse course on that. So
okay. All right.
We've had other properties. There's a house on Cross Street right now that we owned. We acquired through tax sale. And we did a request for proposal on that house too. And it's going to be demoed, but the people that were awarded that building, that property, they're going to demo the house and the outbuilding so the city doesn't have to pay to do that. And they've expressed a plan that within 5 years they're either going to put a house on it or they're going to do a garage or shop type thing. So again, the city's not in the business of real estate. we can acquire properties at times, but we want to turn around and get them back into private ownership as much as we possibly can. So, but we've got several properties like that are either open for bid or will be open for bid. I'd say folks that are interested in that can either talk to us at City Hall or just keep an eye on the Sarcoxy Record newspaper or our Facebook page. So,
and those are going to be the good places to look for properties like this.
It is, yeah. I say subsidized, but for low cost properties. We're trying to change the housing and the appearance of the city. I think most residents would tell you that over the years, Sarcoxy's just kind of deteriorated, and our housing's been a little bit sad. So we've listened, and we've worked the last few years to get into a position where we could start doing more of this to help shape that, and that's where we're at and what we're trying to do.
All right. So while we're talking about this, bettering the community, bettering the appearance of our, of the town, making it look better. There's how about we talk a little bit about nuisances?
Sure.
About how we can encourage, how the city's been encouraging
Sure.
The residents to clean up their properties.
Okay. Yeah, we. I know that's long been a priority of a lot of citizens in Sarcoxy. They talk about that's been one of the big complaints is the kind of the deterioration of housing and some folks letting their yards just overgrow, and it hurts the appearance of neighborhoods, and it has a negative impact on everybody. Just as importantly, it creates a bad image on Sarcoxy itself as an entire city. So we've been working, it's been a few years, and we've been trying to get this perfected and do stuff. We've had a lot of law changes and resource allocations and doing things like that just to get ready to be able to do more on that. And this year's probably been one of the best years as far as doing better with that kind of stuff. The heart of our nuisance and enforcement, which includes yard enforcement, is in our police department. And we're training. We got some new young officers that we're working with, and we're asking them to help. We've assigned regions of the city to individual police officers, and they've got responsibility of going around and just keeping an eye on yards and any nuisance or negative conditions on on houses and stuff. And we've created a program where we give courtesy notices to people, trying to get them to take care of it. And then we've got an enforcement action. We now can and will write tickets if, for example, yards. If there's a house on a property, the standard for grass and stuff is 8 inches. If you're above 8 inches, we believe you're just neglecting the yard, and it hurts your neighbor. And so we can give a courtesy notice, and that's 7 days. If you don't mow it, you're going to get a ticket, and you got to go to court. And you got to mow the yard, but we're still hoping for a penalty too. We're not going to babysit every house and tell them when they have to mow the yard. We shouldn't have to. So we're pushing enforcement on that. We get nuisance conditions too that we enforce as well. A recent example was somebody had left a sofa sitting out in their yard and just left it sitting there for weeks. Well, that's not acceptable to their neighbors, and it makes that neighborhood and our city itself look bad, and we're going to encourage those folks to pick up after themselves and to take better care of their yards. So it's pretty important. It seems to be pretty popular with people. I know I don't get a lot of complaints from people saying, hey, you're being too mean about enforcement of this stuff. Most people are happy that we're doing that. So that's what we're working on. We're also, I don't know if this is the right time to bring that up, but we've really expanded our dangerous building enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can go ahead and talk about
that. Can I talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. We, you talk about nuisance stuff, but one of the real problems we've had are houses that have just almost been abandoned and just allowed to deteriorate. We've been working hard on those houses. We've got a building inspector who has experience in the construction trade, and actually his previous career, and was working as a career fireman, and he did that in a big city. He helped enforce dangerous building codes there. So we're working on those houses too. And I think right now, I believe we have 26 houses that have been condemned.
Now these houses, how are they marked? Or?
Yeah, they have a bright yellow and black sign in the front of their houses. And there's like 5th Street between the square and the community building. I believe there are 3 houses right there that have that condemnation notice on there. But again, these houses, for the most part, the typical house that's got a sign on it has been abandoned or just been left vacant for years and just allowed to deteriorate. And it's a real eyesore. That area specifically, it's hard to be working to improve the ambiance of the square when to get to the square you've got 3 dilapidated, abandoned houses you got to drive past to get to them. So we're trying to do a citywide approach on all of this stuff. And that the dangerous building signage is just the first step on doing that. Ultimately, we want those houses to be either fixed or demolished. Ideally, new houses could theoretically be put up where those lots currently are, so it could have a net positive for everybody.
Now the ones that you're saying that they can either be fixed to where they're not dangerous anymore, or they need to be demolished. Now it's to most of everyone's understanding, I think, and maybe not, that demolishing a house is a lot more complicated than what most people may think.
It very much so, yes. When we do our dangerous building, enforcement, our chief building inspector goes through and the state has standards on what a dangerous building is. We've adopted those standards in our city code, and that's what we enforce. What conditions make a house dangerous. We're not going to come knocking on a house if we just don't like the paint job, okay? We're very much not wanting to interfere in people's business. What we're looking for are houses that have absolutely been dilapidated by any reasonable standard. They're dangerous for people to live in. Sometimes they're dangerous for people to even walk by. And it hurts our community and it hurts the neighborhoods. So it's not fair for people to next door be working on taking care of their properties and their houses when they have a vacant house that's fallen down next to them. They deserve better than that, and that's what we're trying to do.
That's good to know. Is there any general process per se on maybe how you would demolish a house?
Yeah.
And why we're not demolishing more?
Yeah, it's money. It's money. When we hang that sign up, we notify the building owner, the owner of record, and we give them time. It's basically it's a statement from the building inspector that your house, I believe your house is dangerous because of these circumstances, these conditions, and we give them, by law, we have to give them at least 30 days to respond back to the chief building inspector. And most of the time, we don't get any response back at all. All right? We do not want to force this. We want to bring attention to the problem with the building owner. And a lot of times we've been successful that, the building owner will come back and say, you're right, I need to do something. And they will. They'll demo the building, they'll sell it to somebody, and then we can get out of that business. All right? If they don't, and if they ignore that, then there's a process where the city council sets up a hearing to review the evidence of the building inspector why this is dangerous. And the city council then makes a decision of, yep, it's dangerous. We give the property owner time and the opportunity to work with the building inspector to try to fix them. We don't want to force people to tear buildings down. Ideally, the owner would get in there and fix it or make it to where it's not a dangerous building anymore, and then we can resolve it that way. But more often than not, that doesn't happen, and so then we can order the building to be, this is a dangerous building, we order it to be demoed. Where it gets expensive after that is if the city pursues demolishing the building. We have to do an asbestos inspection, all right? And that costs money. And if they find asbestos in there, in a building, before we can even pretend to do demolition, that asbestos has to be removed. And we've had asbestos abatement fees range from $400 or $500 all the way up to almost $7,000. And the city's coffers just aren't that deep. I mean, we cannot hope to demolish all of the buildings that we've condemned all in one fell swoop. Okay, so we've got another component to our law that we had to set up, and that's what we call the registration of vacant dangerous buildings. And if a building's vacant and it meets the city's definition of dangerous, then we can require those property owners to register that building every 6 months and pay a fee. And the fee is $200 every 6 months. And if they don't pay it, there's a pretty stiff penalty that goes into it. And if they ignore it for a year, we can actually foreclose on that property and try to gain ownership on it. We want to make it economically expensive for people to leave vacant houses in Sarcoxy. Right now, I mean, before it was nothing; it was property tax, and that was pretty low. Well, now we're changing that economics. We're making it more expensive for people to keep a dilapidated house in Sarcoxy. We're also requiring properties that are vacant to provide proof of insurance to the city, and if they don't, we can actually write them a ticket. I think we did 18 properties just last week where we wrote tickets to them. Again, it's changing the economics, and we don't want it to be easy for people to leave a vacant, dumpy house here in Sarcoxy. So we're doing everything we can to change that economic.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think because it's like our history in the town is that if there's a dilapidated house, is that they often either fall down themselves or they catch fire.
Yep.
And then when we go to put them out, then they just kind of stay there, and it looks even worse, more of an eyesore than what it originally was.
Yeah. While I've been mayor, it seems like the most typical house fire that we've had have been on vacant houses where the property owner didn't have insurance. And so what we find is these houses will get burnt, will have some degree of fire damage. Our fire department's going to put them out, rightfully so, but then they sit there because there's no insurance to go ahead and get it leveled. The property owner won't spend the money. It's almost like they don't care. And I find it insulting to the city that people would allow that in our community and they just don't care. And so we're trying to eliminate that. Just off the top of my head, 2 of the houses that we demolished in 2018 were fire damaged houses that, again, they were fire damaged. The owners just allowed them to sit there and do nothing until we forced them to do something. So,
well, that's good to know then. No, that's definitely good to know that there's a lot more pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah.
And more complicated pieces than what you'd normally think. I mean, you'd think that you just see a dilapidated house. Oh, well, let's just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Well, now it's good to know that now you can actually know that there's more of a process to it.
The state has a process, and they always like to err on the side of personal property rights, and I agree with that. There is a process, but it's very slow and it can be very expensive. And so you got to prioritize in Sarcoxy. When we have enough money to do something with the house, we just have to be selective in how we do it because we want to be responsible with taxpayer dollars. So,
So there was a survey done regarding Center Street parking and the width of the road narrowing towards the square.
yes.
Could you explain a little bit about what the results were or
Sure.
what we're trying to do?
Sure. Earlier we talked about Center Street. It used to be the main street through the city. It was our version of the main street. And it's one of the busier streets. It's probably the busiest street in Circoxie outside of High Street and 37 Highway. Unfortunately, it's pretty narrow. And right now, the city has a law where there's no parking on the north side of Center Street. But even with that, if you have a car parked on the south side of Center Street and you have oncoming traffic meeting each other, it's almost too narrow. It's almost dangerous to have any kind of parking, is what we were thinking, with two-way traffic along there. If you had parking on both sides, you would not have any room at all. You'd one lane traffic basically. So, the council several years ago looked at this, and then we just didn't really do anything. The Seed Board brought it back up a couple of months ago. So what we did was we looked at Center Street from 6th Street up to 14th Street, did some surveys, and we've analyzed all of that, or are in the process of analyzing all of that, to see if, the potential of maybe eliminating parking on Center Street. The thing is, we don't want to hurt anybody. So, the first thing was seeking public input. Would you be opposed to no parking? How would it affect you personally as a resident or a property owner there? And are there other alternatives for you on parking so that you don't have to park on Center Street? That's the survey that we've taken and we've analyzed. We've still got some more ciphering to do, if you will. We're hoping to have a comprehensive thought or recommendation on what to do with parking on Center Street, hopefully in the very near future. Again, the premise that we're looking at is we don't want to hurt anybody. One of the standards we've talked about is, can you park, I think it's up to 4 vehicles. Does your property have access to park up to 4 vehicles? And that doesn't have to be on the street. It could be in your parking lot. Is there an alley behind you that would grant extra parking? What can be done? But ideally, at some point, we would like to be able to maybe eliminate parking on Center Street, or I personally would like to. So we'll just see where the numbers take us and what the public wants.
Well, I think that's, and on that, I think some of the citizens that were on Center Street that were kind of in favor of eliminating the parking too were safety concerns, right?
Oh, yeah. Because some of these houses, there's kids that live in some of these houses, and if you got cars parked and you've got a real tight, oncoming traffic, kids can step out from in front of a car and you're not going to see them, and you just don't have the width to really navigate that. There's just a risk of somebody getting hurt. Pets the same way. I mean, it's just very tight. It's very congested, and there's just an opportunity there to maybe make an improvement. But again, we don't want to hurt nobody, and so we're looking at that. So
yeah.
All right. And while we're on the subject of Center Street, could you address potholes on the street of Center Street?
We're working with a lot of that. Okay, streets are crazy expensive, and to be honest with you, we pocket away as much as $40,000 a year for what we call the asphalt fund. It's between $20,000 and $40,000 a year that we try to put into a reserve to fix streets. Okay, when you get a pothole, or if there's a lot of times, a lot of our utilities are under the street. And so if somebody has to replace a water line or a sewer line to their house, we're having to actually cut the street out and connect to the sewer. Mainly it's the sewer. Well, then when they get done with that, we'll put gravel in those, and then you got to let it settle, and then we'll try to fill those in with concrete. Well, it just all comes together, and it can cause problems. One of the last big spins, and it was on Center Street specifically. They did several blocks of Center Street where they re-asphalted. Unfortunately, it was a lot of money that they spent. The condition of the asphalt, it just didn't take long term, and so it started breaking apart. Anybody going through there can see that it did not take very good. Personally, that makes me nervous, because you spend a lot of money on that, and if it's bad asphalt, a lot of times it doesn't show up as a problem until after the warranty is done, and you've just almost thrown that money away. So when you get potholes right now, a lot of times you can either fill them with what they call cold fill, or you can put concrete in them. But everything you do just adds texture and deviations on the asphalt. So that's a real problem for us. We have tried to improve our asphalt fund by putting bandages, if you will, on our roads. I mean, we've done crack sealing. The idea is to take care of the roads that we have and build our resources up so that we can make targeted improvements to the asphalt in Sircoxie. I don't know if that's going in the direction that you're asking about potholes.
I think so.
Okay.
But
right now, $40,000. If you're going to do asphalt right, you really need to shave it, what's there now, and then re-pour. And doing that, $40,000 will get you roughly 2 blocks, maybe 3 blocks of road. That's just enough to tease people with doing street projects. That doesn't fix the problem. So we've put a real emphasis on protecting and preserving existing streets by crack sealing and doing stuff to keep it from deteriorating, so we can build up our reserve, so that when we do a project, I think the next project we're talking about is to do Center Street from 11th all the way up to 14th Street. That's not a lot, but the fact is that's one of the main bus routes, and it's some of the roughest street, and it includes that defective asphalt that we did. What we'd like to do is dig it out, fix it right, fix the curbs and guttering, and build it up so that the bus traffic will not tear it up again in the future. So we're looking at grant funding, we're looking at anything we can to do the streets, but it is just so crazy expensive that you just can't hardly afford to do it with the resources we currently have. So
Okay.
I mean, you talk about crack sealing. You're talking not just all cracks. I mean, because you can't necessarily, like, what does that entail exactly?
Okay.
Is that just the straight line cracks, or is that like your spider webs that you see?
Yep, we've done it both ways. The street around the square, we just completely resurfaced with kind of a tar mix that went down an overlay across all of the street. Prior to that, any cracks in there, they blew them out and added a heavy patch that looks like just a line, a stripe. And then through most of the city, we did that with the stripes. So you drive down some roads that have been treated like that, you're going to see, looks like almost like duct tape or something, but a black line where they just overfilled the cracks. And again, those cracks, if you don't seal them, water will get in them, especially in the wintertime, and then it freezes up and it causes expansion, and it'll cause asphalt to blow out. So we're trying to stop that so that when we get enough money built up to do a project, it's not, we've not shot ourselves in the foot with that. So another option we're looking at is doing more chip and seal. Chip and seal now, it's not like what it was even 20 years ago. I personally have a hard time seeing the difference between asphalt and chip and seal. So you put it on and you do it right, that helps. But I caution people that, in the past, a lot of the asphalt work we did was just putting more asphalt on top of existing asphalt. Well, what that causes, that has problems with stormwater, and we've got some points in the city where the crown of the road, the middle of the road, is actually higher than the curbing and the sidewalk. And you can't just keep doing that. At some point, you've got to dig up the old and replace it. You can't just keep going higher and higher.
I believe that would increase the costs.
Yeah, that shaving off part of it and getting down to the base is, it dramatically adds to the cost.
So have we done chip and seal before in the city? Do we have any examples?
Yeah, I think the last time we did it, we did some chip and seal on Bridgeview, which is on the north side of the city, and then we did it on 7th Street from Center Street, I believe it's to Franklin Street. And I think in that investment we had $30,000-$40,000. We did it till we ran out. And so if you go to 7th and Franklin, you're going to see a drop down where we stopped with the chip and seal, and on to Joplin Street is the original layer. So we just have to be, our money can only go so far, and then you're out. So the chip and seal is a lot more affordable than the asphalt, but the consequence is you're just adding height to the road, which can hurt you in other ways too. So,
which is the stormwater, and then
Yep.
possibly future
Yep.
road repair.
Yep, stormwater, future repair, everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you think about speed bumps?
Really, it's more of the speed hump. It's a relatively, I don't think it's a new technology, but everybody's heard about speed bumps in parking lots that are designed to make people go extra slow. One of the problems that cities all across our country have got into is, how do you control speed without having a police officer sitting there nonstop? I mean, policemen can't be everywhere in any city, regardless of the size. Speed humps or a speed table are designed, they're flatter and they're wider than a traditional speed hump or speed bump you'll find in a parking lot. They're actually designed to where, if the speed limit on that road is 20, 25 miles an hour, these tables, you can pass over them with little or no impact if you're going at or below that speed. They're designed to where if you try to cross that going a lot faster than that, you have a noticeable impact. The faster you cross one, the more of an impact you'll have the more noticeable it'll be. So we recently installed one on First Street in a neighborhood where we were getting complaints from multiple households about speeders driving through there. And a lot of times the complaints were, the time frame was when school was letting out or going into session. Well, our on-duty officer or officers were focused on actual, school zones and around the schools. They just couldn't be in a neighborhood that's far away from all of that. So we decided to leverage our money on expending for police protection by experimenting with the speed table. And we put one in up on First Street. We tried it for a while, and I think right now the results are good enough that we're actually looking at maybe trying these in other neighborhoods as well. So
Now, with that First Street trial, I believe you guys the city did a survey to get the feedback from the neighborhood on that. What do you know?
Sure.
Did you have any people that were necessarily displeased with?
Yeah, we when we did this, because again, we don't want to hurt anybody. We want to. We when the city does things, the government does things. They do it to try to address a problem or to help people. To me, that's the role of government, local government, and we did that to address a complaint. And we tried to get input on the front side before we ever did one mechanical thing up there. We put it on our Facebook. We put it in the newspaper about this idea that we had about doing this. We talked about it in open public meetings. And we tried our best to get input from people before we ever did it. And then when we installed it, we tried to get input from people afterwards. That's one way was the survey that we took. We identified, I believe it was 24 residential properties in that neighborhood that we thought would be directly affected by the speed table. And I think out of the 24 that we requested, we mailed a letter to them with, postage. Please just stick it back in this envelope. We'll pay for the postage back to get input. I don't remember if it was roughly 50%, maybe a little bit less than 50% response. Most of it was neutral to favorable, and we had at least one person that was very upset by that speed table, and I personally hate that. We don't want to do anything that hurts anybody. This person was very vocal and contacted me multiple times, responded in the survey, was not in favor of that speed table. But the rest of the neighborhood seemed to be okay or neutral to it. And so, as much as I hate it, I prefer anything that we do, that it be 100% approval. But I'm learning, unfortunately, you can't get that. So we're proceeding right now. The table right there that's installed up on First Street, I don't personally think it's going to be there long term. I think we're going to have to move it to a different location. Again, we did that as a trial to see if the technology would even work. But it's a table that came in like 30 or 40 different pieces, and there's no hope of taking that back off the road that it'll hold together to go to a different location. So we're kind of leaving it there for just a little bit longer until we know exactly what we're going to do. So,
which that's just going to be a little bit more like research, just more
Yeah.
research and.
Well, that's what this next phase is this at the next council meeting, we're going to be introducing a request, a recommendation that we do another neighborhood, a couple of speed tables. I guess it's okay to say we're looking at 11th Street, right there in front of the grade school. We've had a number of complaints about speeders, and we've had some residents in that neighborhood have actually came to City Hall and talked and complained about the speeders. And we've broached the subject with them about that. They're very receptive to trying these speed tables there, and we're hoping it'll get people to slow down. I mean, somebody getting hurt because somebody's being reckless and doing something dumb and hits one of our kids walking to school, we just can't have that. It's a terrible deal. So anything we can do to help control the speed through there, I think, is a win. And what we're proposing is to buy a couple of temporary speed tables again, or speed humps, install them there to kind of create a little bit of a buffer zone in front of the school, and let's just see what it does to traffic, how it affects them, and what the neighbors think, and the residents, and even the school. And if it goes good, I think that we're going to be able to say that speed tables is a viable addition to our resources for traffic control here in Sircoxie. And then maybe we could start looking in other neighborhoods as well. It'd be good, because again, you can't have a policeman, there and at the high school and in the speed zone, the along 37 highway. We got to do things to leverage our protection.
I think that's about good for this segment. Do you have any other additional comments?
No, I hope that people will. I hope that people like this information. We always try to think about the things we're working on, and we value public input. And a lot of times, we weren't even thinking about the speed tables on 11th Street, for example, until some of the citizens asked us, "Hey, you're doing a speed table up here on First? Would you try it here?" So getting input from people are, it's important for this. And I would just invite people. I'd like to, hopefully we can do these interviews every now and then. And so if people have questions, maybe they can email the city or something, and we can keep them, and maybe periodically we can do something like this again.
Okay. All right. Going along that, what would be you said email, what would be the best option for this, or, the residents or citizens or visitors in that fact to ask these questions? How would we be able to get this input?
Well, I know on our email, or on our website, sircoxiemo.com, there's prompts to email different city officials. My email's there, the city clerk, just about everybody. And, if you have a question, just shoot us an email if you want, or call. I'm here on most Saturdays, and we really want people's input. We want to hear from people, even if it's a complaint. It's getting that, knowing what people want, need, and what they're concerned about helps us do a better job. So mine's real simple. It's mayor@sircoxiemo.com. But you can leave even a message on our Facebook. It's monitored. We have 3 or 4 people who monitor that Facebook site all the time. People can ask that question, and we can either respond back on Facebook or back by an email, or maybe we can do something like this again, so where other people can hear what's going on. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm glad we did this. Thank you.
Yeah, this concludes our Q&A with the mayor, and we will reach back out at another time.